Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 14th episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. My name is Suzanne, and I'm a senior library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries here in Colorado. And I'm also a curious genealogist. I have two other staff members with me who are my fellow co-hosts and who are also smitten with the genealogy bug. There is Cindy, a library specialist, and Katy, a career services librarian. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
This podcast is about gathering some tips and tricks for your family search journey for whenever you get stuck on searching for an ancestor, because guess what? It does happen. We also share with you some experiences of our own, along with anecdotes and stories in researching our own families. We have all heard spooky, eerie, scary ghost stories, right? Well, we have some spooky stories in genealogy, too. Most people in the Denver metro area have heard of Cheesman Park and the Brown Palace Hotel to consider for a good haunt. Oh, and the Stanley Hotel, which was in the movie The Shining, which is up there in Estes Park. But imagine the history and or genealogy behind all of that. Well, we have a special guest star today, and Koby is his name, who is a library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries. He is also a tour guide for the local supernatural. Hi, Koby. Enlighten us with a good ghost story.
All right. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Today I mainly did want to talk about Cheesman Park in the Capitol Hill area of Denver. There's quite a lot of history with it and a lot of spooky goings-ons that have occurred over the years.
How in the world do you know all this?
That is an excellent question. Yes, thank you. During COVID, when it first came on, I unfortunately lost the job I was working in. But fortunately, I was looking at job postings online and found one for giving tours in the Cap Hill area, and specifically ghost tours. So I do consider myself a horror movie fanatic. Really love spooky stories, everything Halloween related. So I thought it was going to be the perfect fit.
Okay, now I got to stop you again. How in the world did you look up that particular job entry?
Yeah, what was the actual posting?
Right.
It was just a tour guide post on, I believe I found it on Indeed.
Okay.
Didn't mean to give a plug to Indeed there, not
Right.
sponsored. They just said they were looking for people who love to talk, and I certainly do. And also people who are enthusiastic about sharing stories, specifically ones about ghosts.
Nice. Excellent.
I'd love to just dive into a bit of the history to start off with. It used to be known in the late 1800s as Denver's City Cemetery. And at first, a lot of townspeople were complaining to the city. They said the cemetery was hideous. There were weeds everywhere, all sorts of scavenger animals, and even with Denver's soil, unfortunately, over the years, some of these coffins would slowly start rising back up to the surface, bringing on even more scavenger animals and all sorts of grave robbers and things like that. So the city was very much adamant. They said, okay, we're going to do something about this. And they said they had an idea that they were going to turn it into Congress Park. But first, they were like, we should probably move all of the bodies out of the cemetery first. Probably not going to be the nicest park with all those coffins about. So they had a job of moving 5,000 coffins out of City Cemetery, all to different cemeteries all throughout Denver. So I can only imagine how the record keeping, especially back in those days, went with that.
Right.
So they hired around a dozen men to start digging up the bodies and then start moving them. And there were, like I said, about a dozen of these men. They were getting paid about less than $1 per coffin, but with that many coffins split only between that few of men, they were making a ton of money on this job, especially because nobody else really wanted to do this kind of dirty work. They were making a good amount of money, but of course, with money, it's never enough. Right. These men started getting a little bit greedy and just a little bit clever. They started thinking to themselves, well, we're getting paid per coffin, so why don't we just make up a few more coffins, make an extra buck? Then what they chose to do next is very creepy, very morbid, very gross. They started chopping up all the bodies that were on hand, and then they would move some of those body parts into infant-sized coffins.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, disgusting.
Yeah.
All just to make some more money. Yep. And of course, they were caught. This was a job designated to them by the city, and they were doing this all during broad daylight. So that's where their cleverness kind of ran dry.
Brilliant.
Yes, exactly. 12 really smart men.
This would be a dumb criminals video on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But yes, of course, this was a huge scandal, and it put the project to turn it into Congress Park on an immediate halt. Then there were even rumors of one of the men that was involved moving the bodies that was working. He was reportedly stealing some body parts from those graves, bringing them back to his residence where he would perform satanic rituals with them.
Oh no.
Now that is creepy. That's not just greedy. That's creepy.
Yes, and according to these rumors as well, he was caught for his crimes, and he was hung in the streets of Denver.
Whoa. What year was that? Do you know?
Ooh, gosh, that was late 1800s, all around the same time period. But later, they did thankfully decide to still turn that property into a park. Sadly, they did not end up moving any of the bodies that had remained. So they moved a good amount of them, but now, according to our numbers, there are still around 2,500 bodies still remaining under Cheesman Park.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, where people
Yeah.
are walking their dogs, and it's right next to the botanic gardens.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful.
Playing frisbee.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a
all
gorgeous
kinds of
park,
stuff.
yeah.
Yes.
And then, it was called Cheesman Park, too, because a prominent businessman of Denver, Walter Scott Cheesman, his widow and children were the ones who donated the most money to get that pavilion built there. But yeah, beautiful park. If you ever plan on going, any of you listeners out there, you'll notice that the ground is still very bumpy and hilly. It is not the most flat park. Probably can't play like soccer or anything there, but yeah.
Probably because a couple of bones are.
Yeah, don't want to trip up on any of them.
Yeah. Wow.
What's even crazier is when it snows there, you can even sometimes make out indentations of where some of the tombstones used to be,
Oh,
which is
wow.
pretty
Wow.
cool. Yeah. And to make it even spookier, too, a lot of people, especially at nighttime while walking around Cheesman Park or if they're out and about, there's been a lot of reports of people seeing these ghostly figures. Yes, very spooky, and it's technically considered one of the most haunted parks in America.
Ooh.
There were two movies that actually had some inspiration for Cheesman Park. One of them being Poltergeist.
Oh.
I just rewatched that this this Halloween season, and amazing. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot was inspired from Cheesman Park from that. Mainly just the line where it's they moved all the headstones, but they didn't move the bodies.
Exactly.
If you've ever seen this movie, it's a bit more obscure. It's from the 1980s called The Changling. That movie is entirely based off of a property that was just on the outskirts of the park. It was owned by a Russell Hunter in the 1960s. And in real life, this building was reported to be so haunted that nobody would touch it with a 10-foot pole. So the city ended up just demolishing it.
Yeah, and the movie, though, I don't know if you all have seen it. It has George C. Scott in it, and it is really creepy. And I think it is based on this family that lived there. George C. Scott, his family all dies in a car accident, except for him, obviously. So he moves in there, and then he starts hearing different things, and a lot of it is as a child. And what they have said is that this family had a child that was somehow disabled or something. So they sent that child to Europe to be schooled or whatever. And then when he came back, he was just a really nice child. Or they were supposed to have sent him to Europe, but
Right.
they didn't. They got rid of the child and said he was in Europe learning all his manners and everything. And then they brought home this other kid. I'm not sure.
Wow.
how truthful that is, but that's what the movie is based on. And it
Wow.
is fabulous. It is fabulous.
Oh yeah, absolutely worth a watch.
Koby, after all of this stuff, and you were a tour guide there, so I'm sure you walked around there a lot. Did you have any experiences, or any of your tourists, I suppose, anyone experience anything or tell you something that you didn't know about ghosts or weird feelings?
Well, there was one instance. It's not necessarily Cheesman Park related, but on one of the tours I was giving one day, we were by a historic property in Cap Hill called the Peabody Whitehead Mansion, where it was all gated off. It was currently being worked on to become apartment complexes, if you can believe that. I don't think I'd ever want to live in a place
living
that
there.
is that haunted.
Right.
Nope.
And yeah, while I was in the midst of giving my just history speech about the property, a woman had decided to sit down on the front stoop right in front of the gates. And as I'm just giving that history spiel, she just starts screaming, like blood-curdling scream right next to me.
Whoa.
Made my heart, jump out of its place. And when I asked her what was wrong, if she was all right, she told me that this hand had reached through the gate and grabbed her by the shoulder. And what was even creepier was it was in the middle of summer, and she was wearing the spaghetti strap shirt. And she invited myself and the rest of the people on the tour to touch her shoulder, and it was ice cold. Middle of summer,
goodness.
rest of her
Weird.
arm was regular body temperature, and even later on the tour, like 10 minutes after, still ice cold. And we were just really worried that like something was following her from the property. We have no idea. I still have no follow-up with that, though, unfortunately. I hope she's doing all right.
So when she left and whatever, do you think she still had that cold feeling? Or did that dissipate?
I really hope not. Yeah, I hope she was able to go to a bar or something, take the edge
yeah.
off, and
Yeah,
Seriously.
right. Right. Maybe that was her ancestor or
Yeah.
something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know?
oh, exactly, yeah. Well, and it's just wild to think about all of this history, especially when talking about Cheesman Park and the cemetery, bringing it back to genealogy as well. Of who knows if any of these Colorado residents who maybe have Colorado ancestors whose remains may still be under Cheesman Park to this day.
Okay, so for those family members who have people who were buried under there still, this is the genealogy, because you can, well, if there's gravestones, you can go and you can check the gravestone and you can look at it, take a photo of it, or on your camera phone. If you really want to have some interesting information, check out episode 12 of this podcast, because we do talk about gravestones and the markings and symbols of it and some other little kind of trivia stuff, which is pretty interesting. But seriously, the genealogy part, that is, everyone has some sort of burial, cremation, whatever.
So I'm
So-
thinking, if my family hasn't been in Denver long, they came in the 50s, but I'm thinking a lot of people here who are natives and their ancestors were living at that time. And say you're looking it up, saying I'm looking for
Right.
great Aunt Sally, and there she is. We know she was buried from cemetery records in what I don't know what Cheesman Park was called before that, just the Denver Cemetery.
Oh, Denver City Cemetery. Yeah.
Okay, so they see that's Denver City Cemetery, but now they have nothing, because I'm assuming with the integrity of these 12 men, when they moved these people, probably a lot of them did not get gravestones subsequently, unless the family was involved. But you'd think probably most of them are just now, that's a dead end for finding great Aunt Sally. Aunt Sally, is she in Cheesman Park? Is she somewhere in one of the other subsequent cemeteries? But now no one will know.
And we were talking earlier about forensic scientists, with checking DNA, because wouldn't that be a gigantic project for some sort of CSI person or forensic person to unearth all of those bones and so forth, and to do some sort of test? But you said about the botanical.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, the Denver Botanical Gardens are directly next to Cheesman Park, and they actually do have a forensics pathologist working on call for them because they never know when they're going to run into more bones when they're digging up for new exhibits, or most recently, they even when they were working on their parking garage, digging up all the ground for that, they accidentally stumbled upon a mass grave in the cemetery. So when it comes to things like that, too, there's not one gravestone. It was probably during some kind of epidemic.
Right.
Lots of people dying at the same time.
Spanish flu era,
Yeah,
1919.
you're not sure if you can contract something
Wow.
from these bodies. Safer to
Yeah.
just all dump them into one hole. So, yeah, it makes it
So-
way, way more difficult to track down these
Yeah.
ancestors.
So now I'm curious, because you said a mass grave, but did they have any more information, whoever they are?
I don't believe so. Not that I know of. No idea who those people in the mass grave were. I'm sure they were doing their due diligence on checking,
Was that
for
part of
DNA
Cheesman
records,
then?
things like that. It was definitely like further on the outskirts, so it could
Okay.
have been,
Huh.
on the edge of the cemetery.
Yeah.
But
So that looks like a good research project for somebody who's
For
curious.
somebody's PhD
Right.
project.
It's forensic.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
Botanic Gardens is not really it. I mean, there's a gate that leads from them into the park, but you don't think of Botanic Gardens as being part of that cemetery. So that is weird that that they would find a mass grave there.
yeah,
Wow.
like a little bit further out from. This was, I believe, the largest cemetery in Denver at the time, if not Colorado. But
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a great documentary or one of those reality series. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and if
Oh,
they
I'm
could
totally-
do DNA
totally
on
curious.
some of those people, wouldn't that be just really fascinating to find out who some of these people were, or if their relatives have been looking for them?
Yeah.
They were just
Yeah.
lost to time, and especially if it was like a plague situation or something, or
Yeah.
the flu.
Yeah.
People were afraid of them and afraid to touch them. So that kind of would make sense that they would all just be together in a place.
So I heard someone say about tunnels. What are these tunnels?
there are actually miles and miles worth of tunnel systems all underneath Denver. I think a lot of major cities, in fact, do. And a lot of the times, too, there have been some links of tunnel systems connecting municipal buildings to what used to be known as brothels back in the day. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Corrupt politicians.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, corrupt
It goes way
politician-
back.
Corrupt politicians, corrupt grave diggers. Denver kind of has it all.
Yeah, they sure do.
Well, and there are even rumors of these tunnels being underneath our Capitol building as well. And there has been rumors, too, to tie in some more spooky stories. I got another ghost story for you. Some of the first serial killers of our nation, actually, were the Bloody Espinoza brothers, I believe is what their names were. And they were wanted dead or alive. It was still kind of Wild West times. And so, of course, when they were found, they were just easier to transport if they were dead. So they were killed. And the people who caught them decided to decapitate them and just bring their heads as proof. And according to these rumors as well, their heads actually stayed underneath the Capitol building for quite some time after.
Whoa.
So
Oh, my
nowadays,
goodness.
in their archives down there, in the basement levels of the Capitol building, some staff have reported seeing these two ghostly heads floating through
Oh
the
my goodness.
tunnel systems.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
I grew up in Denver. I never heard of that. So that is a
Wow.
really great ghost story.
Right?
And that's pretty spooky, if you ask me. There's a couple of heads floating around. Katie, what do you think?
I'm just fascinated by everything, and I want to go out to Cheesman, soon, and just like hang out and see what I see. I'm just curious, like, they moved all the gravestones, but did they all end up in a different cemetery, or did some of them just get? I mean, they removed all of them, so did they all end up somewhere, or did they in an actual cemetery?
I have to assume that at least with at least the people in the cemetery who still had living family members, I'm sure they worked with them to relocate them to a cemetery of their choice. I would hope that they went that way about it. But yeah, especially after those gents did what they did with all the bodies, I can't even imagine the mess it would be to try and sort all of that out. So who knows if their headstones even stayed with the proper body. And yeah, if they ended up where they were meant to be at several different cemeteries all throughout Denver is where they were all relocated to.
Well, just knowing those 12 gents and what they would do for money, if you're going to cut up a body and put it in an infant coffin for money, I'm wondering if they sold some of the headstones because they're, beautiful granite or whatever, and maybe some of those old stately homes around Cheesman Park, because a lot of them are built of that old stone. I wonder if any of them contain any of those headstones.
Ooh, that's a thought.
Yeah, who knows where their corruption started and ended. Yeah.
Where do you hide a bunch of gravestones, or what do you do with them? So for me, to think that they probably sold them because that's just the kind of people they were.
They're in the tunnels.
Maybe they are.
You would never get away with that kind of stuff today because we take burial grounds and stuff very seriously. And if you come across any remains or anything, that's they have to investigate, etc. So it's really fascinating to hear what kind of things actually happened.
Well, and everybody has a camera, so it would be a news story. If you know the identification of this person, call the hot tip line or Crime Stoppers. Just some 12 guys that look like workers walking around, and people.
Hey, we can trust you.
Exactly. They just look like nice guys who are trying to make a living, and they were making a living.
Yeah.
Making a killing.
Yeah.
But I'm changing.
Yeah.
I had to, sorry.
So is there anything else spooky, cold, or, atmospheric that you can think of?
There is a good amount of research that's been going into these things called way lines. I myself have not dug in too deep into it, but I believe there are just these basically, if you took a string of yarn across the globe, and I think like some of the other points of where they start the line could be like the pyramids or Easter Island heads, things like that. And they look to see where these lines intersect. And according to these way lines, Capitol Hill in Denver is actually dead center on one of these way lines.
Whoa.
Could potentially, be one of the reasons why there seems to be a lot more upticks of ghostly activities, paranormal activities going on in the Capitol Hill area. And I also think it just has to do with Capitol Hill has done such a beautiful job of keeping all of those historic buildings intact. The Historic Society has saved a lot of those buildings from being demolished over the years. And a lot of the times with these older properties, they just are able to hold so many more stories and histories. And I think that's where a lot of the paranormal can come in from as well.
Well, and they talk about, if you watch Paranormal Investigations, they talk about energy that's left over. And so sometimes you see, I can't remember there's a word for it, but, you see a ghost or something, but it's like history replaying. It's residual energy. So I wonder how many of these buildings have, like residual energy or imprints of things that happened that, that show up or that people witness. And
absolutely.
And that reminds me, because we did an episode earlier about a history of a house, the genealogy of a house, and it'll give information. Anyway, to go and check out the episode of A History of a House or Genealogy of a House, because that'll give you information on who lived there before you purchased it, before you lived in it, before you rented it, or before it was bulldozed.
Okay, so Koby, Katy was just talking about residuals. What I have not heard of that really. I've heard of like auras and things like that, but not really residuals.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Katy, because there are ghosts that are considered to be residual ghosts, not necessarily ghosts that are popping out to scare you, things like that, like the ones from horror movies. These ghosts, when they are sighted, it is normally the person who had passed away doing an activity that they did a lot, and or seen in the clothes that they wore all the time. And a lot of the times in a specific location in Cap Hill is actually the Molly Brown house. Right. That has been known to have a lot of residual ghosts, where Molly's husband was a constant smoker, smoked all the time, loved his cigars, and a lot of the times when people are on tours, when they're in his office, they will just complain about the smell of smoke, even though nobody else is really smelling it anymore. It's had decades to dissipate, and they're still smelling it as if somebody is puffing on a cigar right next to them.
Oh, funny.
That is really interesting.
Totally is.
And that, for listeners who may not be familiar with Molly Brown, but she and her husband found a giant mine.
The Little Johnny's mine.
The Little Johnny's mine. So that's
Leadville,
where in Leadville where they made all their money. But she was, and why she's called unsinkable, she was on the Titanic and did actually survive and helped a lot of other people survive. I think a lot of kids.
I think she survived 2 shipwrecks, actually.
2?
I think so.
Wow, so she really was unsinkable.
Yeah.
Oh,
Maybe that's why
so.
her husband's cigar smoke is still hanging around.
Well, she was one of Denver's most prominent people of all time. She started the Dumb Friends League even. She fought for children's rights with labor laws.
I thought she was a suffragette, too.
She was, she even ran for office, I believe. Even before women had the right to vote, she ran for office, I think.
Wow.
So she was a strong personality in life.
For sure.
So in death, that wouldn't be too far out to say she still lingers, her husband still lingers there in that house where they lived.
Great. The husband smells. That's nice. Aside from the husband's cigar smoking, is there any other visitors there?
People have reported seeing Molly Brown as a residual ghost herself, of just hustling down one of the narrow hallways. For any of you listeners that haven't done the tour there before, highly recommend. Lots of rich history, very cool building as well. But yeah, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about with those narrow hallways that she would be seen hustling down.
And speaking of the Molly Brown house, remember Arapahoe Libraries has the Exploration Pass, where you, as a library card holder, can go to some of these places listed on the website for free. And Molly Brown House is one of them. Go to arapahoelibraries.org and then go under services, and then you will look for the Exploration House. Exploration Pass, or
Explore Colorado.
Explore Colorado. And then you'll just do as it says. You go to the calendar, pick what date you want. It'll say booked or request, and you will just hit that. And each of these places you can get in for free. It's a one pass, good for 2 to 4 visitors to get in for free. And just check, because there's a couple that do have a minimal charge, but majority of them are free. And what a great idea as an education experience, for a little lesson if you're a homeschooler, for visiting family who are bored. Take them to the Molly Brown house, and maybe you'll catch some smoke.
Right, and you may see Molly hustling down her hall. I'm sure you can hear like her skirts swishing, because she probably was a fast walker, purposeful.
Oh, yeah, she had places to go, people to see.
Yeah, she was a busy
Things
lady.
to do.
So I'm sure she's running up and down those hallways.
Okay. Well, Koby, do you have anything else to tell us?
Now that Halloween is come and gone, and it is now approaching the holiday season, I just wanted to give a plug to my other tour guide friends in the business here in Denver. They do holiday lights tours. Ghost tours are always happening. Denver history tours. Definitely, like you said, if you're looking for something fun to do, I highly recommend checking out tours in Denver.
Nice.
That
Excellent.
sounds wonderful, and it's not just fun and entertaining; it's educational.
Yep.
And Denver does have a colorful, fun history. So yeah, that's a great idea, Koby.
Well, yeah.
great
Koby.
Christmas
Thank-
gift
Oh,
or
yeah.
a great holiday
Holiday,
gift
yeah.
for anybody.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We enjoyed having you and talking to you and your enthusiasm about dead people.
Oh, and all things spooky, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right.
I grew up here, as I said, and I learned a lot
Nice.
that I didn't know. So thank you again, Koby.
Yeah. Thanks, Koby. Well, that's it for episode 14 of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. But I just want to say we do have a disclaimer. The three of us are not certified genealogists. We are just three people who are sitting around and gabbing about genealogy. We hope that some or all of this information helps you along the way to finding your family. Well, once again, thanks for listening. What do we say? We say goodbye. Goodbye, ladies.
Goodbye, ladies.
Bye, ladies.
We'll see you soon.